Hey guys, it's Miss Casso. So this video is going to cover IMRaD format, which is the format that your observation reports will be submitted in. Okay, so you've been doing, well, week one you did MLA and then you dabbled in APA. You've been doing your other assignments such as the translation essay in MLA. Your literature review that you should have completed last week is actually the first part of your observation report. And so we kind of split this assignment over 2 weeks because you have to do your literature review before you can actually run any kind of experiment in IMRaD format. So let me back up a little bit and I want to explain to you kind of what these terms mean, okay? So what is an observation report? When will you see it in the rest of college, that sort of thing, and then we're going to break down IMRaD format, okay? So I'm going to more talk at you instead of writing it on the board. So if you need to pause it, please feel free so that you can get this down in your notes, okay? So an observation report, well, let me back all the way up. So an IMRaD report, introduction, methods, results, and discussion. An IMRaD report is used in the sciences, which is also why it's an overall APA format. So the gist of an IMRaD report is that you are a researcher, okay? And so you have run some kind of experiment that results in data. So you have collected some kind of data. And then from that data, you draw conclusions about what you think your data means, okay? So observation reports are more specific to us actually observing human behavior. So that is a very specific scientific report format, okay? And the reason we choose that one is because we get to go people watch. So you guys will go out into your various spheres where you interact with people, whether that's, in the public or it's in a restaurant, your place of work, you're always interacting with other human beings. So last week, you were doing your literature review in which you got to select a theorist of human development and human behavior. And you got to really get into the background and the foundational research of why human beings do what they do, why they act like they act, okay, based on the theorist that you chose. So a literature review in any kind of scientific report is you going over past literature. Now that means something a little different in the sciences. It doesn't mean literature like stories or fiction that we hear in like an American lit class, right? A literature review is literally a review of the literature. And what they mean by that is the scientific literature. So you guys did your literature review last week in order to get a background information for running your particular experiment, okay? So scientific reports are published in IMRaD format and they are in overall APA format. So let's break down the APA, okay? So APA format, you're going to have your title page, you're going to have an abstract page, you're going to have content pages, a references page, and appendices, okay? And if you only have one, it's an appendix, and I'll explain what those mean, okay? So you guys already submitted the one-page APA formatted doc back in week one. So this should be a review except for the content, okay? So the content's going to be different for an IMRaD document. So APA, you've got your title page correctly formatted. Okay, so all of you have received feedback about what errors you made on your APA formatted title page, which means that the penalties are going to be more severe, okay? Because if I've already given you feedback on what you need to change, if you keep submitting that, then your points are going to go down. So just make sure that you reference the feedback from week one in order to change what you needed to change so you can keep more of your points, okay? So you've got your title page. Abstract page, let's pull this out for a little bit, okay? All right, abstract page overall is a summary of the experiment you ran, okay? Now, this is overall what an abstract is, okay? To write an abstract, you write it after you finish, whoop, that is not how you spell finish. The content pages, okay? Now, this is really significant because you do not write an abstract page in the way that you would think you would in order. What I mean by that is this, like when you're constructing your document, you're going to start with your title page and then you move on to abstract page and you don't have anything else written in the paper. It's kind of like writing an introduction paragraph before you got anything to introduce, okay? So introduction paragraphs are written last. I know that's weird, but they're written last because you need to start with your content pages so that you know what you're talking about or what you've written about. And then when you go back and write an intro paragraph, it's a summary of what you wrote, right? So it's introducing the topics. In IMRaD report documents, the summary, the introduction paragraph, quote unquote, is considered the abstract. Okay, so that being said, the abstract gets written last. It gets written after you've already finished your content pages. Okay, now the other important thing about an abstract is it is a one-sentence summary of each section therein. And what that means is it's a one-sentence summary of each one of these sections that are content sections in an observation report or a scientific report, okay? So I'm going to show you over here what that looks like. And again, you're writing your abstract last, which means that you've written your introduction, you've got your lit review, you've got, where is it, methods, you've got results, you've got discussion, okay? So when you're writing an abstract, and remember, you're writing it when? You're writing it last, right? So you're going to skip over, when you first are constructing this, you're going to skip over abstract and you're going to go to content. We'll talk more about that in a second too, okay? So when you get to where you're writing your abstract, the introduction section should have a one-sentence summary. You'll have a one-sentence summary of your lit review, a one-sentence summary of how you ran your experiment, a one-sentence summary of what you found out, and a one-sentence summary of what you think your data implies, okay? All right, so we're gonna hang that out over there. Move this. Because now we're gonna go into what each of these sections mean, okay? So we're gonna put IMRaD format at the top, and this is for scientific reports. When the researcher wants to publish her or his findings to a wider academic audience. And I know that that is quite the paragraph explaining for IMRaD format, okay? But I want you to understand the purpose of IMRaD format so that when you're constructing yours, you understand why you're doing it the way that you're doing it, okay? So IMRaD format is for scientific reports after a researcher has already run an experiment and she or he wants to publish their data so that other people can build upon it, okay? So especially in the sciences, science is data-driven and it's relevant data-driven, which means that you are looking at the most current data to build upon for your next experiment. So here's another way to look at it. If I'm a researcher and I want to research, let me think, bystander behavior, okay? So one of the student examples that you guys have in the week 4 folder, my student did his observation report on bystander effect, okay? So his experiment was, he worked, I believe it was in a CVS, and he set up the experiment where he put products, like made them look like they fell off the shelf in one of the aisles, and then he took data on how many people and what kind of people, age, race, gender, picked up those products and put them back. And he was also taking data on if they were by themselves, were they more likely to skip over the product on the floor, or were they more likely to put it back? Likewise, if they were in a group, were they more likely to skip over the product on the floor, or were they more likely to put the product back and help out the employees of CVS? So he wanted to run his experiment. So he goes, sorry guys, I was explaining the experiment and I totally lost my train of thought. Hold on. Scientific reports and research wants to publish their findings. Okay, so he runs his experiment, right? His literature review is based on what other people have researched about bystander behavior. Then he runs his experiment. Then he's publishing his data so that the next researcher that's interested in bystander effect can build off of him. Does that make sense? So as researchers, you are going off of the foundation of what others have done before. You are contributing your experiment, publishing your data, so that someone else can build upon it, okay? So that's overall the purpose of a scientific report, the IMRaD format. Now, Science is very, very particular. It's kind of like math, right? So 1 + 1 = 2, not 2 3/4, not 16, it equals 2. There's only one right answer, right? Same thing with IMRaD format. They are very particular about how these reports are published, and every single researcher follows the exact same format, okay? There's a couple reasons for this. Let me see if you can, over here. Okay, so a couple reasons for this. Number one, I have a lit review, right? Let's say that I'm looking up, I don't know, bystander behavior. We'll just keep going with that. I'm going to look at this other research over here about bystander behavior. But let's say that what they were researching isn't necessarily specifically what I want my report to be on. And so I won't look at that research, right? It's not required that you look at every single thing that's ever been published on bystander behavior, right? So you want to find information for your lit review that actually makes sense for what you're doing. So let's say the lit review either was incomplete or they had outdated data or whatever, then I wouldn't look at that particular article, okay? Same reason why they have a methods section. So a methods section is where, and we're going to get more specific into each one of these in a second, but a methods section is how the experiment was run, okay? So let's say that I have this idea for an experiment and I want to collect data, but then I'm looking at the articles for my lit review and I'm like, dang, like, you know, 15 of these people have run the exact same experiment that I want to do. Well, then I probably need to change up what I'm doing, yeah? With results, same thing. Let's say I'm looking at data and I was like, wow, that data kind of is already in line with what I'm doing, and I don't really see any further implications for research, so I need to change up my experiment or my approach, okay? And then discussion is where you look, in general, for conclusions that the researcher has made about her or his data. All right, so that's why they're in that specific order, is so that you as the researcher can vet these articles before you use them in your experiment. Does that make sense? Hopefully that makes sense. Okay, so let's break down, oh, drop my eraser. Let's break down each section more specifically, okay? Okay, so you've got your introduction section. Okay, typically this will be one small paragraph, including, and by small paragraph I mean like 3 to 5 sentences, okay? Don't get crazy, don't give me one sentence paragraphs, all right? So one small paragraph including the research question you ask yourself, okay? Now the other way to look at this is, why were you interested in this particular experiment? Okay, so why were you interested in this particular experiment? Okay, so introductions are meant to be smallish. Okay, so an introduction section is going to be the first section on an IMRaD document after the title page and the abstract. So we're talking about content pages. Okay, so maybe we should put that up here. These are your content pages. So your introduction comes first. That is not legible. There we go. An introduction section is your first section of IMRaD. It's a smallish paragraph and it includes why you ran the experiment that you did, okay? And then you cut yourself off. So it's a very small section, okay? What comes next is your literature review. And you guys completed those last week. Okay, so you can literally copy and paste from week 3. So this is going to be the second section of an IMRaD document, okay? Don't get confused because it's IMRaD, and so some of you might be like, well, it's just introduction. Why am I putting my lit review in here? Those two things are very closely associated, all right? And again, look at the student examples for reference, because I believe there's 2 100s in there, 2 papers that received 100s, and 1 paper that received an 80, but all 3 of them had really good organization of content, okay? So if this is kind of going over your head or you're getting a little overwhelmed, go ahead and pause the video, pull up a student example, and that might be helpful for you to be looking at while we're going over these lecture notes, okay? All right, first section is introduction in an IMRaD document. Second section is your lit review. Again, you can copy and paste from week 3, okay? Let's say that you didn't get to your lit review, though, in week 3. you need 3 sources with in-text citations, meaning you are quoting from those sources, okay? And then keep in mind that those 3 sources will be on your references page, okay? Those 3 sources will be on your references page. So as overall APA format, you're going to have in-text citations for APA, all right? MLA is author's last name and page number. APA is what? It's the date, okay? It's the date the research was published. So please don't give me MLA citations in this APA document, all right? So definitely double check those. Now, same for your references page. APA citations, like the full citation where it's author, let me see if I can remember this, author, date, title of the article, title of journal, issue number, volume number, page number. I believe that's how it goes, okay? But double check on Purdue OWL. Double check on Purdue OWL. That's how the reference citations are going to be for APA, okay? So again, please do not do MLA citations for an APA paper. But let's back up and review this, okay? So your lit review, which you already should have completed, will be copied and pasted from week 3, okay? Make sure that that lit review includes 3 sources, 1 primary and 2 secondary, right? And if you don't know what that means, you need to go back to week 3 because there's a really long explanation of what a lit review is. 1 primary, 2 secondary. You will be literally quoting from those sources in your lit review, and then keep in mind that those 3 sources need to have full citations for that references page, okay? Full citations for that references page. Give you a second if you need to look at that, okay? So introduction is introducing the research question or why you chose this particular aspect of human behavior or human development to look at. Your lit review is a review of the foundational literature that contributes to your experiment. Okay? And these are going in order, right? This is a very specific order for IMRaD. So we've got introduction, and which includes lit review, right? And then the next section is methods. So this will be the 3rd section, okay? Now, let me pause here for a second just for some formatting stuff because you guys get super creative and jacked up about how you do this formatting, okay? That introduction section needs to be at the very top of page 3, okay? So title page is its own page. I almost said references page, y'all. Title page is its own page. Abstract page is its own page. And it's going to look kind of weird because it's just that 1 paragraph at the top and then you got all this space. That's how it's supposed to look. Page 3 is where you start with the introduction, okay? Introduction, and then you got your lit review, and then you've got your methods and so on. There's no extra spaces between these sections, okay? So let's say you do your introduction. Here, let's do this. So you've got introduction, and you need to double check how headers are formatted in APA, okay? So introduction, blah, 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 blah. And then you've got your literature review. These are centered, okay? Wait, no, I just lied to you. No, they're not. My bad, y'all. So we've got introduction, blah, blah, blah. Literature review. I cannot spell today. Okay? There is no spaces. Well, there's 1 space, but then it's double space. So just make sure there's only a singular space between the sections, okay? They should be touching each other, in other words. So introduction is not on its own page, and then I've seen like lit reviews on their own page, and then methods on its own page. Like, no, this is 1 cohesive flowing document, okay? So the introduction should start on page 3. It should start on page 3 because you've got title page, abstract page, content pages, okay? Remember, these are the content pages for a report, for a scientific report, all right? So I just wanted to stop and let you guys know that. Okay, back to methods. So methods in general is how the experiment was run, okay? How the experiment has won. Oh my goodness, guys. How the experiment was run. Now, this is extremely, I cannot emphasize this enough, specific, okay? Extremely specific for methods. So you will see 2 sections of a methods section in IMRaD format. You're going to have materials, and you're going to have procedure, okay? Materials is everything, and I do mean everything, you used to run that experiment, okay? Everything you used. So when you look at the student examples, like for instance, my student Gabriel, who ran the CBS experiment, the bystander experiment. So it wasn't just his notebook and his pencil to collect data, okay? He had to be extremely specific about the product that he had kind of thrown on the floor. I believe it was like a pack of toilet paper or something like that. But that was used in his experiment to run his experiment. So in his list of materials, it was something like pen, paper, 12 pack of Charmin Ultra Fluff toilet paper, etc. Okay, it has to be that specific. And here's why. This goes for materials and procedure. Okay, you are a researcher, right? You have gone out into the field, you have collected data, and now you are at the point where you are publishing your data for the wider academic audience. In science, if you cannot run the exact same experiment and get the exact same results, then there's something wonky going on, right? So you have to have what's called validity in the experiment. And the way that we make sure that we have validity is that we say exactly how we ran that experiment, so that if another researcher is questionable about the data that we got, she or he can run the exact same experiment in the exact same way using the exact same materials. Make sense? Okay. So it's a way for peers in the scientific community to check each other. Okay, so if I'm reading an experiment report and I'm looking at data and I'm like, I don't know about that data, well then I or my research team can run that exact same experiment and see if I get the same results. If I do, it's valid data. If I don't, then we have to go back and examine the experiment all over again. Okay, so that's why it's so specific. So the materials section is everything you use to run that experiment. The procedure is step by step how the experiment was run, okay? And again, student samples, student samples, student samples, okay? So you can look at how in-depth those student researchers were going to make sure that their procedure was clearly outlined. And it literally goes from, I did this first. So the phrasing is, you know, first the researcher set up aisle 13 of the CVS on Horner Boulevard at 11 a.m. on a Saturday with the 12 pack of Charmin fluff paper on the floor, period. Next, the researcher blah, 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 blah. Then the researcher blah, 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 blah. Somewhere in there is going to be, at this point, the researcher began the experiment and data collection, okay? And then how you closed off your experiment. Closing off your experiment is typically specific to what time you concluded taking the data. So for instance, I had a student who went to Chick-fil-A and he was looking at what demographic of fathers actually played with their children in the play place at Chick-fil-A. So was it black fathers, was it Latino fathers, or was it white fathers? And so he was there, I believe, for 2 hours. And so the last part of his procedure section was something of the such like, you know, experiment concluded at 8 p.m., blah, 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 okay? So whenever you're closing out your procedure, it's typically like when you stopped collecting data, okay? When you stop collecting data. Okay, I need to make a note of myself over here. First person versus third person. All right, so we'll come back to that in a second. Okay, so again, methods, super specific. Everything you use to run the experiment, and exactly, precisely, step by step, how you ran your experiment. That's the third section of IMRaD. Okay. The next section is results. Okay? And that is where you publish your data in graph form. Okay? Now, let me speak to this for a second. Your results, your data that you find out, initially, you're just going to have it probably written down in a basic form. Okay? And I would highly suggest that you figure out some kind of like table system for when you're running your experiment so that you can quickly take data. Because if you're trying to like create, okay, here's participant 1 and you're trying to struggle, get everything down, and then you're trying to set up the boxes for participant 2, you're going to miss out on your data, okay? You're going to miss it out or you're going to get stressed out. Either way, we don't want that to happen. So have a pre-made table of some kind, and not a graph, hear me, a table for data collection. So that's where you have the boxes where you can put tally marks in it, right? Or you can write what's called anecdotal data, which is sentences. So like, I observed female participant 1 on her phone 6 times through the process of ordering at Starbucks or whatever, okay? So you can have tally marks depending on how you set up your tables, or you can have anecdotal data collection where you are writing what you see in sentences. Okay, so at first, your results are going to be in basic form. When you publish a results section, though, in IMRaD format, you need to convert basic data collection to graphs. Okay? Now, you guys are probably seeing how intense this particular report is, all right? That's why I backed off of your readings for this week, and I gave you more time to focus on each of these individual sections because they are so specific and in-depth and scientific, okay? And stuff like this, you know, you have a basic format of your data collection, but then you have to convert it into visual graphs, okay, or visual data, which is graph form. What graph you choose and how you choose to format it is completely up to you, but it does have to be converted to graphs, and here's why. We are all extremely busy people, right? So as scholars, we just want to get to the meat and potatoes of the data. Like, I don't have time to be searching through someone's table and be like, okay, well, how does that connect to this and more? No, okay, that's not appropriate for IMRaD format. So we convert our data to graphs, and so that other scholars can look at it and immediately see the information that we got, okay? I would point you to Autumn Murkison's student example. At this point, she did a fantastic job with her graphs. Okay, she did a really, really good job with her graphs. And you will see that you do have freedom as the researcher of how you want to group your graphs together. Okay, because not only are you collecting data on the human behavior that's interesting to you, right? Like fathers playing with their children, or kids at a playground playing interracially, or whatever. So that's the thing you were interested in. But you're also collecting data on race, approximate age, and gender. Okay, you're also collecting data for those 3 things per participant. So if you go look at Autumn's graphs, she was interested in grouping I believe it was problem behaviors that she was doing. So she was interested in doing like problem behavior escalation per race, or problem escalation per if the person was around other people. And so she determined how she put her data into graphs, okay? There's no, well, I almost said there's no right or wrong way to do it. Like, there's no right or wrong answer to the question, how should I graph my data? It's how you choose to graph your data, if that makes sense, okay? All right, so that's the results section, which would be the 4th section. So let's review. First section is introduction. Second section is that copied and pasted lit review. Third section is methods, and 4th section is results. Okay? Okay. Okay. The final content section, hear me, not overall section of this IMRaD format. The final content section is discussion, okay? Discussion is the only place, that is not how you spell that, only place, only emphasize, place you can use first person. And you should, okay? Because a discussion page is at least 3 analysis points based on your data, okay? And this can be implications of data. I'll explain that in a second. Possible connections to other data or other things or stereotypes or whatever it is, okay? So we got implications of the data, possible connections of the data, or just in general what you think your data is proving, okay? Now, we've gone over, I believe in previous videos, the difference between objective and subjective language, okay? So in IMRaD format, objective, 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 subjective, okay? So in other words, third person, here's the experiment that was run by the researcher. Do not say, here's why I did what I did, okay? First person is not appropriate. This experiment was inspired by a need to research blank or whatever, okay? So third person, objective. Methods. You can't really be like, you know, well, this was a good way to run this experiment, or the 12-pack of Charmin Fluff paper was an interesting product to use. Like, none of that is appropriate in IMRaD, okay? Methods is literally, here's what I used, here's how I did it, right? Moving on to results. Data is data. You do not present the data and then say, and this is what it means, in a results section. Results is just pure, unadulterated data, okay? Discussion section is where you go, and this is what I think it means. Does that make sense? So, and this is what I think it means. So discussion is the only place you can use first person, and you should. You should be like, you know, I believe that the data set from day one, not that you have to have multiple days, but a lot of people do because they're crunched for time. So let's say the researcher was like, well, on day one's data set, I found blah, blah, blah. Day two data set was reflecting a variance or something different from day one. And here's what I think that means, okay? Okay, I think, well, let's go over this again. Okay, so at least 3 analysis points from your data. So are there implications that your data is supporting? Are there possible connections to stereotypes of human behavior or sociological norms or those kinds of things? And basically, what do you think your data is proving? Okay, what do you think your data is proving? All right. Oh, sorry, I erased it, but that would be the 5th section. Okay, that would be the 5th section. So we've got first section, and then we got a little review right here. Right. Is the 2nd section, 3rd section, 4th, 5th. Okay? And then you are done with your content pages. Okay, you're done with your content pages. Let me get a sip of water. Okay, the 6th section is your references page on its own page, okay? So for some reason, students like to tuck references right up under discussion, and that's not proper APA format, okay? Just like a works cited page is its own page, a references page is its own page. So if your discussion ended, like say at the top of this page, you need to go enter, 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 and get to a new page, excuse me, and label it references page. Okay, so that's where your citations are going. And then your 7th section are your appendixes. Appendix, or if you have more than one, it's called appendices. Okay, so an appendix or an appendices is your tallied data, okay? So researchers will put their initial basic data collection as an appendix so that we can just literally see what they did. And the reason for that is what's called transparency. So I don't know, based on their graphs, if they just kind of made all of this up. So you include the basic tables that you use to collect your data at the end. And the reason they come after the references section is they're there just in case someone wants to double check you, okay, as a researcher, just in case someone wants to double check you. So those are put at the end. The way that you would label these, though, is Appendix 1, Appendix 2, Appendix 3, if there's like separate sections or separate documents that you're including. If you're only including one data table, it would just be Appendix 1, and that's it. No matter how many pages it is, it would just be Appendix 1, okay? Alrighty, I think that's it. Let me double check my notes. Yeah, okay, so that is basic IMRaD format. I know there's a lot of technicalities to this particular format, so please, if you're unsure, either go back and rewatch the video so that you can just get these points in your head, or email me or set up an appointment, you know, either in person or we can talk on the phone and I'll walk you through it, okay? All right, guys, good luck in your experiments. I'll talk to you later.